"I'm sorry, Ma'am, but we've run out of first-class meals. You can have a sandwich." The voice cut through the quiet cabin like a blade slicing through the luxury air. Seat 2A, often called the seat of the important, suddenly became the center of attention. Naomi Ellis lifted her eyes, meeting the cold, indifferent gaze of the flight attendant. Her lips pressed together, and for a moment the air seemed frozen. On the cart trays of first-class dishes, grilled salmon wine, braised ribs, warm bread were still steaming. Yet in front of her sat only a cold sandwich, wrapped in shiny plastic. "I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?" Naomi asked softly, her voice quiet, but sharp enough to cut through steel. "You heard me," the attendant replied. Her name tag read, Karen Sloan. She tilted her head slightly, a faint smirk flashing like a small wound. "We're out of meals. If you want to eat, this is your option." The soft clinking of cutlery stopped. A few passengers glanced over. Others pretended to read their newspapers, but their eyes never left the scene. The silence in the cabin felt like glass, transparent, cold, and heavy. Naomi set the sandwich on the tray. Her hands trembled slightly. That familiar sting of humiliation rose in her chest, the one she had learned to bury beneath layers of composure. As the CEO of Skybridge Airways, Naomi had faced boardrooms full of men investors who doubted the competence of a black woman. But at 35,000 feet above the ground, the insult felt quieter and deeper. It wasn't words that hurt her. It was the way they looked at her, the way they decided she didn't belong here. She took a deep breath, swallowing the heat that burned in her throat. "I understand," she said slowly, her tone calm and deliberate. "But I won't forget this." Karen shrugged. "That's up to you." Then she pushed the cart forward, the click of her heels echoing down the aisle, leaving Naomi there with the sandwich, a perfect symbol of how the world sometimes treats women like her. Enough to keep them from starving, but never enough to make them feel respected. 1 hour earlier, Naomi Ellis had walked through the international terminal at O'Hare Airport in a simple cream cardigan. No Armani coat, no pearl necklace, no assistant trailing behind. Just her, an old leather bag, and a gold chain that once belonged to her mother. This was her 4th invisible CEO test, a secret experiment to observe how employees treated customers when they didn't know who they were serving. At hotels, she'd been ignored at the front desk. At restaurants, she'd seen waiters laugh behind her back, assuming she was the housekeeper of some wealthy man. But today was different. This was her own airline, the company she had built from a dying regional carrier into one of the largest names in American aviation. "No one will recognize you, Anthony Rivera," her vice president of operations had said half-jokingly when they planned the test. "Just blend in like a regular passenger. I'll watch from business class." Naomi smiled. "Good. I don't want special treatment. I want to see how they treat everyone else." And now, in seat 2A, she was seeing everything raw, unfiltered, unscripted. As the plane ascended, Naomi looked out the window, the sunset painting the clouds in crimson light. In the seat beside her, a white man in 2B laughed loudly, his voice filling the cabin. Karen poured champagne for him with a graceful hand, tilting the glass just enough so the bubbles wouldn't spill. "Would you like some more French wine, sir?" Her tone was soft and honey-sweet. Naomi gave a faint, bitter smile. She opened her laptop and began typing into a document titled Customer Reality Check. The first line read, "First class, cabin-biased service." Strong sense of not belonging. Each time she typed another word, the coldness in her chest turned to a quiet fire, not anger but purpose. She knew emotions fade, but evidence does not. From behind her, a man's voice spoke softly. That was awful. Naomi turned around. A black man in seat 3A, dressed in a simple shirt, was looking at her with understanding. Happened to me too. They probably think I got on the wrong flight. Naomi nodded. No, they just think we don't deserve to be here. In the quiet luxury of first class, 2 black passengers sat in silence, saying nothing more, yet understanding everything. Naomi picked up her phone. The camera pointed forward, pretending she was scrolling through social media, but in reality, she was live streaming to a small internal group, the company's cultural standards team. Today I'm flying first class on Skybridge, she said softly, her voice even and composed, and I want to see if our brand truly honors every passenger the way we claim it does. Within minutes, the view count rose from 40 to 120. Karen noticed. She glanced over irritation and suspicion flickering in her eyes. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Just recording my experience," Naomi replied calmly. "It's been quite interesting so far." The word recording dropped like a stone into still water ripples spreading instantly. The man in seat 1A looked up, the one in 2. B frowned. Karen froze, then turned away, lips pressed tight. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment, hearing her mother's voice in her mind. When they make you feel small, stand tall. When they take away your respect, you still get to choose how you respond. She opened her eyes, looking at her reflection on the phone screen. Calm face, but eyes burning like molten steel. "All right," she whispered. "If they think I don't belong here, then I'll let the whole world see how they treat someone they think doesn't matter." Outside the window, the sun had vanished, leaving a deep indigo sky streaked with violet. The cabin lights reflected across Naomi's face, the glow of a storm quietly being born. A storm not loud, not reckless. It began with a sandwich, and it would end with a revolution. 60 minutes before the sky turned into a battlefield, Naomi Ellis was just another shadow, blending into the rush of travelers at O'Hare Airport. No one noticed the black woman in a simple cream cardigan, carrying a worn leather bag and wearing low heels that carried no hint of power. At 42, she was used to walking into rooms where every eye measured her worth, but today, she chose to become invisible. It was the only way to see the truth. Naomi wasn't flying to be served. She was flying to observe. The Invisible CEO campaign was her own idea, a strategy that had once left her boardroom stunned. "You're planning to pretend to be an ordinary passenger. No one does that," one shareholder had protested. Naomi had simply smiled and replied, "Exactly. No one does it, which is why no one knows what's really happening." She understood that internal reports and customer satisfaction metrics could always be dressed up to look good, but the way a flight attendant smiled, the way an employee handled the smallest request, that was the real DNA of a brand. Before the trip, Naomi held a private meeting with her vice president of operations, Anthony Rivera, a 39-year-old man who had helped her resurrect Skybridge Airways from bankruptcy. "Are you sure you want to fly alone, without any escort?" Anthony asked, his voice laced with concern. "I'm sure," Naomi replied, folding her arms. "If they don't recognize me, that means they're seeing a regular passenger. And if a regular passenger is treated poorly, then we have a problem. And what if they do recognize you?" Naomi smiled, the kind of smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Then we have a bigger problem." Anthony laughed softly, but there was tension behind his eyes. He would sit in business class 4 rows behind her, observing while Naomi experienced first class, the service she had once believed was the crown jewel of Skybridge's brand. The first-class check-in counter that morning was a portrait of contrast. Men in Italian suits, golden watches, and gleaming Rimowa luggage. Women with oversized sunglasses and expensive perfume floating around them like a soft mist. Among them, Naomi Ellis in her pale sweater and faded leather bag looked like she didn't belong. The counter agent glanced at her ticket, hesitating for half a second. "Are you sure seat 2? A first class, Naomi smiled calmly. "I'm sure. Oh, of course, enjoy your flight." But Naomi saw it clearly. The look wasn't welcome. It was doubt tinged with pity. At the boarding gate, the doubt turned into attitude. Karen Sloan, the lead flight attendant, stood at the cabin door with a half smile. "First class today, is it?" Her tone was sweet, but edged the kind of sweetness honed by years of serving the wealthy, soft enough to stay polite, sharp enough to remind others of their place. Naomi nodded. "That's right. Seat 2A. Karen studied the ticket longer than necessary. Her eyes moved from the ticket to Naomi's face, then to her shoes, her scuffed bag, and the simple gold chain around her neck. Just one brief second, but enough for Naomi to understand exactly what she was thinking. "A woman like you in here." "This way, please," Karen said, her voice noticeably cooler. No welcome aboard like she'd offered the others. At that moment, Bethany Crow, the blonde junior attendant with a high ponytail, approached. She exchanged a quick look with Karen, so brief that anyone not trained to observe would have missed it. A smirk, a faint exhale through the nose, silent signals of shared contempt. Naomi stepped into first class, a world of dimmed lights, white leather seats, the scent of wine and polished walnut. But instead of warmth, she felt the quiet chill of bias. No one smiled at her. No one asked if she wanted to hang her sweater. No one explained the amenities. Just a detached, "Please have a seat," as though she were an uninvited guest. Naomi took a slow breath and sat down. She wasn't angry, not in the way that makes you want to stand up and argue. What she felt was disappointment, cold and familiar, like fog pressing gently against her heart. Around her conversation filled the air. A white businessman in seat 2B received the first glass of champagne. The attendant leaned close, beaming. "So happy to serve you, Mr. Davidson." Naomi watched quietly, then lowered her gaze and opened her laptop. A small silver Dell, not as flashy as a MacBook, but the same one on which she had signed hundreds of million-dollar contracts. She opened a file labeled Field Observation, Flight SB218, and typed 8:32, boarding, no greeting, visible suspicion. 8:40, noticeable difference in treatment between white and black passengers. Each line was a blade, cold, deliberate, precise. When the attendant passed by, Naomi asked gently, "May I have a glass of water, please?" Karen didn't stop walking. "We're serving other passengers first, Mom. I'll come back later." The words weren't wrong, but the tone made them an insult. Naomi added another note. 9:02. Basic request, delayed tone, condescending. Across the aisle, Anthony Rivera pretended to read a magazine, but his eyes followed every move. He knew Naomi was documenting, and he knew that when Naomi stayed quiet for too long, it meant she was furious. 30 minutes later, Naomi picked up her phone, turned on the camera, and angled it discreetly. She began a private live stream, visible only to the company's senior leadership team. "Good morning, everyone," she said softly. "This is Flight SB218, First class. I'm recording a first-hand service experience. On the other end, Skybridge's communications and legal departments began logging the transmission. We're about to see. Naomi continued whether Skybridge's philosophy of respecting every customer truly exists in the sky or only in our commercials. The screen's glow reflected across her face, casting a cool, determined light. She didn't know that just a few hours later, this footage would be watched by millions, proof of a powerful lesson about privilege, prejudice, and dignity. When Karen returned, she noticed the phone. "Are you recording?" Naomi smiled. "Just documenting my journey." Karen frowned, her tone sharp. "I'd appreciate it if you respected the crew's privacy," Naomi replied softly. "And I'd appreciate it if you respected the rights of paying passengers." The air between them grew thick. Every gesture, every glance was recorded. Each frame, each word, every detail. In Naomi's mind, one quiet thought surfaced. If this is how they treat me, the founder of the company, then how are they treating the ones who have no voice at all? That question was a spark, small but strong enough to start a fire. As the morning light began to spread across the horizon, Naomi sat still, her gaze distant. Outside, sunlight glinted off the plane's wings like a prophecy. That day, an empire would be forced to look into its own reflection. 18 minutes after the plane reached cruising altitude, Naomi Ellis still had nothing but a cold stare to show for it. She stayed silent, but inside, every vein seemed to beat a rhythm. In first class, the smallest things say everything. A glass of water delivered late a greeting without a smile, a scrutinizing glance, each detail seemingly harmless, draws the invisible line between belonging and not belonging. The man in seat 2, B. Silverhair, a Rolex glittering on his wrist, was receiving his second glass of wine. Flight attendant Karen bent with a charming smile, her voice soft as silk. "Would you like to try our new Italian vintage, sir?" Naomi watched, then looked down at the empty tray before her. No water, no warm towel, no polite check-in. Only the cold gap between her and the people considered worthy. She tilted her phone slightly, the lens catching Karen as she walked past, her eyes skimming Naomi as if seat 2A did not exist. Naomi whispered just loud enough for the mic to catch 9:41 passenger, 2A still not served. Passenger 2B receives a second beverage. Each line of notes, each clip of video, like small stones, she stacked carefully, preparing to build a wall of truth. The galley door opened, the aroma from the meal cart drifting through the cabin, the music of luxury metal lids lifting the soft chime of utensils. Karen and Bethany rolled the cart down the aisle, light glinting off the silver trays, brightening the cabin by a shade. People laughed and chatted, waiting for the main course. Naomi observed, eyes sharp as a camera recording every detail. When the cart reached her row, Karen glanced at her notepad. Seat 1A, short ribs. Seat 1B, salmon. Seat 2B, seared salmon. Then Naomi's turn. Karen looked up, her smile gone, and announced in a voice cool and loud enough for the whole cabin to hear, "Ma'am, we have run out of first-class meals. You may have a sandwich and water." In that instant, sound drained from the cabin. Cutlery-stilled conversations swallowed themselves. Naomi met her gaze, dark eyes steady. "Out of meals?" Karen nodded, unbothered. "Yes, that is correct." Naomi glanced down at the cart. At least 4 unopened trays remained. She said nothing, only looked. She looked long enough that Karen broke eye contact, turned away, and pushed the cart to the next seat. A voice rose from behind. "Wait," said Darius Mitchell, in seat 3. "I can see food on the cart. How is it gone?" Karen turned back, voice hard. "Sir, please do not interfere. We serve according to priority." "Priority?" Darius arched a brow. "Are you saying she is not a priority?" Bethany stepped in, tone edged with mockery. "Some passengers need to understand their place." The words dropped into the cabin like a stone. No one laughed, no one spoke. Only the low hum of the engines remained, the steady sound of a system too familiar with silence when wrong is happening. Naomi felt her heart tighten, yet her face stayed calm. She had heard lines like that all her life. Know your place. And her place right now was 2A, the seat they believed she did not deserve. She quietly unwrapped the sandwich, set it beside the empty water glass, then took a photo. Light from the window fell across the tray, a perfect frame of contrast on the left, a plate of luxurious braised short ribs on the right, a cheap sandwich. She posted the photo on TikTok with a short caption, "First class, $1,200, and this is how they treat you when you do not look like the customer they expect." A minute later, the phone buzzed. 5 comments, then 10, then 100. Her network of aviation followers began to pay attention. Naomi typed quickly, "Code red flight, SB218, seat 2A, full documentation mode, PR and legal on standby, sent." On the other end, Priya Shah, head of legal, read the message and picked up the phone. "Monica, trigger the internal crisis protocol. She is filming for real." Karen returned her smile, more forced. She saw Naomi's phone screen lit. "Are you recording?" Naomi answered evenly, "I am documenting my journey." "That violates crew privacy. And what about discrimination?" Karen froze. One beat of silence, then louder, as if asserting authority. "If you continue to cause trouble, I will have to inform the captain." Naomi did not reply. She simply looked straight ahead with the gaze of a woman who had sat in rooms where every word could move a stock price. Behind her, Darius whispered to the passenger beside him, "She is being treated badly." The other nodded, lifting a phone slightly. Within seconds, 2 different angles had captured the entire exchange. On TikTok, Naomi's first clip was spreading like a storm. Hundreds of comments flashed. "I cannot believe this is Sky Bridge." Did they really say, "Know your place"? Tag the CEO. The irony, they had no idea she was the CEO. Naomi set the phone down on the tray. She did not argue, did not raise her voice. In her mind, she was calculating not revenge, but repair. She thought of the dedicated staff on the ground, the people who would be hurt by the bias of a few. But she also knew if she stayed silent, nothing would change. She looked out the window. White clouds streamed past like the current of her thoughts. The sky outside does not sort by skin color, it does not know prejudice. Yet in this cabin, the distance between 2 seats said everything. Naomi murmured half to herself, "No one deserves to be made small, just because they look different." In business class, Anthony received a message from the communications team, internal live stream viewership spiking. Passenger 2A is being treated unfairly. The images may spread. He looked up towards the front. Naomi was sitting, straight light reflecting across her face like a cool halo. Anthony understood the storm was coming, and it would not stop with this cabin. Karen continued serving the remaining passengers, her sweet tone sliding back into place, as if nothing had happened. But each time she passed, seat 2A, the air grew thicker. Naomi closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her lids, she heard the lines she had listened to throughout her career. "You are talented, but some may find you a bit difficult. Do you not think you are being a little too sensitive? We are not biased. We just want customers to feel comfortable." Those phrases were always delivered politely, but they carried the same message. Know your place. This time she did not plan to forget. She opened her eyes and looked straight into the camera lens. A cool light flashed in her gaze. "All right," she said softly. "Let them prove their worth to the whole world." She did not yet know that in just 10 more minutes, a threat of an emergency landing, a frantic call from the board, and a historic reveal would shake the American sky. Before the storm hit, Naomi took one long breath. The scent of stale bread, the hint of wine, and the smell of truth mingled in the heavy air. One first-class cabin, 2 attitudes, and a lesson about to be written in dignity. As the clatter of the service cart faded, Naomi Ellis sat up straight. The serenity of first class tightened into the airlessness of a windowless room. She felt it clearly. The surrounding glances were not curiosity so much as a blend of discomfort and confusion. From behind, Darius Mitchell in seat 3A leaned forward. "Are you okay?" Naomi turned, offered a small smile. "I am, but I don't think they are." He nodded lightly. "I've been recording from the start. If you need it, I'll send the video." "Hold on to it," Naomi said. "We may need it, not just for us, but for a generation that comes after." Across the cabin, Karen whispered to Bethany. Both pairs of eyes flicked toward 2A voices, low but loud enough for a few to catch. "She's making a big deal out of nothing. Yeah, this kind of passenger always thinks they're being singled out." A soft ripple of laughter. Naomi set her phone squarely on the tray table camera forward. The screen reflected her face, composed eyes hard as tempered steel. She said nothing, simply opened the voice recorder. A small motion, but as precise as booting up the company's entire oversight system. Minutes later, Karen returned with annoyance, disguised as a stiff smile. "Mom, are you filming?" Naomi looked up. "I'm documenting my experience. That isn't allowed. You're violating crew privacy, and your refusal to serve me violates no one's rights." The air thickened. A few passengers lifted their eyes from the entertainment screens. The engines droned steadily, but first class no longer felt calm. It was taut as a string about to snap. Karen leaned in, lowered her voice, the edge still sharp as a blade. "You should respect the airline's rules. If not, I'll notify the captain." Naomi smiled lightly, a smile that made Karen step back. "Good," she said. "I think he should know what's happening on his flight." Bethany stood behind, arms crossed. "People like you are always looking for trouble. Everyone's tired of that victim attitude." The line detonated the room. A woman in row 1, A, turned. "What did you just say?" Bethany replied coolly. "I said some people always think everything is prejudice." Darius rose his voice, controlled yet trembling with anger. "She paid for a first-class seat, and you're serving her like she's in economy. That's not thinking, that's reality." Karen pivoted to him. "Sir, please sit down. You're causing a disturbance." A disturbance. Darius's mouth twisted. The only disturbance here is how respect went missing. No one noticed that Naomi had switched the stream to public. Her phone was now broadcasting the first-class cabin of Flight SB218 in real time, where a confrontation was breaking open. "Who is she?" one passenger whispered. "Probably some activist," another answered. "Oh God, we're in a live scandal." Viewers climbed by the second. 300, 700, 2,000. Karen did not realize that every word, every gesture was going global. Naomi remained steady. "I'm not causing trouble," she said, eyes forward. "I'm documenting how this airline treats a black passenger." "You are violating flight safety regulations," Karen replied. voice higher. No, I am protecting my dignity. Bethany cut in, voice harder. Enough! I'm calling the captain. 5 minutes later, the cockpit door opened. Captain Charles Whittaker, a tall, silver-haired man of 53, stepped out with the authority of someone convinced everything was under his control. He stopped at seat 2. A voice low and firm. "Ma'am, I'm told you are filming and obstructing the crew." Naomi looked up, her eyes still. "I'm not obstructing anyone. I'm recording my experience. Your experience is making others uncomfortable. I need you to stop immediately." "Uncomfortable?" Naomi repeated, her voice dropping sharpened to a blade. "Captain, what makes them uncomfortable is not the filming. It's the fact that the truth is being seen." Whittaker paused. Just a beat, but enough for Naomi to know he'd heard something he did not want to accept. He adjusted his Thai voice, stern. "If you do not comply, I will initiate emergency procedures and divert to remove you from this flight." The cabin shuddered in shock. "You'll do what Darius stood. You'll declare an emergency because a passenger is recording. So please return to your seat," Whittaker said, his confidence already thinning. No, Darius said loudly. "You're threatening a woman because she asked to be treated fairly. And he swept the cabin with his eyes. We all see it." A hush rippled through the cabin. Some passengers lifted their phones to film. Others sat in tight silence. Naomi tilted her head, light catching in her eyes like a newly struck flame. "Captain," she said softly, yet her voice carried farther than the engines. "Do you know the most dangerous thing in any organization?" Whittaker frowned. "What is it when the person with power believes they cannot be wrong?" Whittaker froze. The air seemed to crystallize. Naomi picked up her phone and typed quickly, "Emergency board session level 5. Connect live feed. I'll handle it. Sent." 30 seconds later, her phone rang. The screen flashed the caller, Robert Kingston, chairman of the board of Skybridge Airways. She tapped speaker. Dr. Ellis Kingston's voice rolled out deep and clear enough for half the cabin to hear, "We have convened an emergency session. The entire board is awaiting your report on the incident aboard Flight SB-218. Karen blanched. Bethany swallowed. Whittaker stood motionless. Naomi rose slowly. Every other sound disappeared. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she said, her voice smooth as silk and heavy as thunder. "I will begin now." She turned to the captain, her gaze no longer angry, only calm with absolute authority. "I am Naomi Ellis, Chair and Chief Executive Officer of Skybridge Airways, and I have just experienced how our airline treats a black passenger." The room exploded in silence. A woman in 1A let her wine glass fall. The man in 2B went rigid. Bethany stepped back, lips trembling. Whittaker whispered, almost inaudible. You're the CEO, yes," Naomi said. "And today I didn't fly to be served. I flew to see who we really are when we don't know who is watching." The quiet stretched like low pressure before a storm. No one dared breathe fully. Naomi bent, ended the camera feed, then looked up. "Thank you for the real-world lesson, Karen, Bethany, and you, Captain Whittaker. I think we'll need a much longer conversation when we land." She turned to the rest of the cabin, her voice low and measured, every syllable weighted. "Dignity is not priced into a ticket. It lives in how we treat people when we assume they have no power." Her eyes swept the room, settling on Karen-frozen lips, working for a reply that would not come. Naomi continued, her tone gentler now, each word etched into the air. "And now I want you to witness this. Skybridge will not just apologize. We will change. Darius was the first to clap, then another, then the whole cabin. Applause swelled, blending with the engines, not noise, but awakening. Beneath the deep blue sky flight, SB-218 hurtled east, carrying a truth that could not be hidden when power is tested by dignity. Only one thing deserves to fly higher: self-respect. Flight SB-218 continued toward New York in absolute silence. No more laughter, no more clinking glasses. Only the soft hiss of wind along the fuselage and the steady thrum of the engines, a mechanical rhythm that seemed ordinary. Yet in first class, everyone knew that everything had changed forever. Naomi Ellis settled back into seat 2. A seat that had been a symbol of humiliation and now had become the seat of justice. Across the aisle, Karen stood, frozen eyes, wild and avoiding Naomi's, while Bethany stared at the floor, her face flushed. Captain Charles Whitaker had slipped back into the cockpit, but that thin door could not hold back the wave rising behind it. Darius Mitchell kept his eyes on Naomi. He leaned in and whispered, "You just changed an entire industry." Naomi gave a faint smile, not triumphant, only quietly tired. "I do not want to change an industry, Darius. I just want them to learn how to see a person, not a color." 2 hours later, the wheels kissed the runway at JFK. The landing was smooth, yet Karen's whole body shook. Sweat beaded on her forehead, even with the cool air. When the captain announced, "We have arrived in New York. Thank you for flying Skybridge Airways," no one replied. Naomi rose first. She did not need to say more. Every gaze in the cabin was already on her, a mixture of shame, fear, and respect. She turned to Karen and Bethany, her voice even and low. "I hope that someday you will understand that your smiles and your glances can lift someone up or make them feel invisible." Then she turned to Darius. "Thank you for not staying silent." He smiled. "Not everyone gets to stand next to justice in the sky." Naomi nodded. In the sky is exactly where people reveal their nature. As she stepped off the plane, the Skybridge team was waiting at the gate. There were no greetings, no cameras, only Priya Shah, the chief legal officer, and Monica Green, the head of human resources, came forward. Dr. Ellis Priya said softly, "We have reviewed the entire recording. Communications, legal and public relations are on standby. Response time, 4 hours. No 1 hour," Naomi said. "The slower we move, the greater the damage. Prepare the official statement and issue suspensions for the entire crew from today's flight." Monica drew a breath. Including the captain. Including the captain. He threatened an emergency diversion for a matter unrelated to safety. That is an abuse of authority. Priya nodded and tapped her phone. "I will send the documents now." Through the glass, Naomi saw Karen stepping off the jet bridge, dazed. In that instant, Naomi did not see a villain. She saw a distorted product of a system that she herself was responsible for fixing. "Priya," she said more slowly, "make sure every step follows proper procedure. I do not want revenge. I want fairness." 30 minutes later, Naomi's phone would not stop buzzing. Messages, calls, media alerts. The hashtag Skybridge discrimination was spreading like wildfire. More than 400,000 views in a single hour. On Twitter, major outlets reposted the clip of Naomi being denied a first-class meal, along with her clear statement, "I do not need special privilege. I only need the same respect given to any other passenger." Naomi Ellis, CEO of Skybridge Airways. Below it, the comments erupted. "I cannot believe the CEO was profiled by her own airline. She is calm and unbelievably strong. This is a historic moment for aviation. Television networks broke in with urgent updates. The COO of Skybridge Airways becomes a victim of discrimination on her own carrier. Naomi moved quickly through the terminal, her phone still ringing. Anthony Rivera was waiting in the emergency conference room at the New York headquarters. 28th floor, Skybridge headquarters, 1:30 in the afternoon. The air was thick with coffee and pressure. 12 senior leaders sat around the table. When Naomi entered, they all stood. She did not sit. She took the head of the table, hands braced lightly, voice clear. Today, Skybridge does not just have a public relations crisis. We are facing a moral crisis, a beat of absolute stillness. We have invested hundreds of millions of dollars into a brand built on human-centered service, yet people are being hurt by the very system meant to honor them. No number can justify that. A marketing executive spoke carefully. Dr. Ellis, we could pivot the narrative to emphasize your decisive response. Naomi cut him off. No, this is not a public relations opportunity. This is a chance to make amends. If we intend to change, we begin with the truth. She nodded to Anthony. He brought the incident to the screen footage of Karen and Bethany serving others while bypassing Naomi. Under the bright lights of the boardroom, no one could speak. Naomi's voice dropped resonant as a bell. This is not a personal incident. It is a mirror of our culture. If the CEO can be treated this way, what are our frontline employees enduring? Today I am signing the Zero Tolerance Protocol, a no-excuse policy for any form of discrimination, even the smallest slight. The room held its breath, the only sound the air conditioning. Then Anthony spoke quietly. I will own the rollout. No one will ever wonder again whether they deserve respect. Naomi nodded. Thank you. And remember, do not do it for me. Do it for everyone who has ever been forced into silence. That evening, as the sun slipped behind Manhattan's towers, Naomi sat alone in her office. The glass walls reflected the city's lights, glittering and cold. On her desk, the airplane sandwich she had carried down still sat in its box. She looked at it and smiled sadly. One sandwich, she whispered, and an entire revolution. The phone rang. It was Anderson Cooper from CNN. Dr. Ellis, I would like to have you on live tomorrow night. The country is talking about this. Naomi closed her eyes and drew a long breath. All right, but I do not want to talk about me. I want to talk about us. Us. About how people treat each other when they do not know who the other person is. On the line, Anderson paused. See you tomorrow night. Naomi set the phone down. City light traced her face, equal parts weary and resolute. She knew the real battle was not media management. It was the fight to reclaim dignity, the thing the world so easily misplaces even in first class. She lifted her phone and sent a final message of the day to every Skybridge employee starting tomorrow. Serve not just with procedure, but with heart. None of us is permitted to make a customer feel small. Naomi leaned back and looked out over the lit city. Below, New York kept moving, unaware that a single sandwich in the sky had opened a new chapter in the history of corporate justice. She smiled faintly. The storm had come, but for Naomi Ellis, this was not the end. This was the beginning. The next morning, America woke up to a story that covered every front page. From CNN to NBC to every online news outlet, the same image appeared everywhere. Naomi Ellis, the black woman, in a cream cardigan, sitting in seat 2A, with a plastic-wrapped sandwich in front of her. The headline was bold: CEO of Skybridge discriminated against on her own airline. Morning shows skipped politics, skipped the stock market. They talked about Naomi. One host remarked, She could have been angry. She could have revealed her identity right away. But instead, she stayed calm and let the world see itself in that mirror. Millions replayed the video clip. Every frame, every glance, every uttered phrase, "Know your place," sent chills through viewers. And for the first time, instead of anger, people felt ashamed. That afternoon, Naomi appeared at the CNN studio in New York. The waiting room was so silent that the ticking of the wall clock was loud. She wore a light grey suit, neat but modest, the same gold chain from her mother resting at her collarbone. Minutes before the live broadcast, Anderson Cooper entered, shaking her hand with a rare look of respect. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Ellis," he said. "Thank you, Anderson. I think it's time this story is told. Not for me, but for the millions who have sat in their own seat. 2A. Anderson raised his brows slightly. "Their own seat, too." Naomi smiled. "The seat of those who have been seen as undeserving, even though they paid the same price." When the studio lights came up, Naomi looked directly into the camera. The light in her eyes was no longer anger, but a calm and steady glow, the light of someone who had been diminished and stood tall again. Anderson began, "Dr. Ellis, many say this entire incident could have been avoided if you had revealed your identity at the start. Why did you choose silence?" Naomi drew a deep breath. "Because if I had said I was the CEO, they would have served me with a fake smile. I would never have known the truth. I don't want respect because of my title. I want respect because I am human." The studio went still. Anderson paused before asking, "Some say your response, suspending the crew, grounding the captain, was too harsh. What do you say to that?" Naomi gave a faint, calm smile. "You see, when they told me to know my place, they weren't talking about a meal. They were defining the limits of who deserves to exist comfortably. If I accepted silence, I would have become complicit. And if my actions cost someone their job, that's the price of a lesson this society still refuses to learn." A moment later, Anderson leaned forward. "Do you believe this is a personal problem or a systemic one?" Naomi faced the camera, her tone slow and steady, as if speaking to every viewer sitting at home. "This isn't just about me. It's about every organization, every company, every place where service exists. When you believe someone is lesser simply because they look different, you kill the soul of your business. Culture isn't written in an employee handbook. It's written in how you treat the people who have no power." The studio light seemed to soften. A rare, quiet second passed on live television. Anderson nodded slowly. "You've just made a lot of people look at themselves differently." The interview ended. Naomi left the studio to the applause of the crew. When the door closed behind her, she leaned against the wall, breathing deeply. She didn't know exactly what she had just done, only that her heart felt lighter. Online, the interview spread like wildfire. The hashtag #KnowYourWorth filled social media, shared by millions, along with the clip of Naomi saying, "Dignity does not need permission, it only needs to be upheld." In a single night, Naomi Ellis was no longer just the CEO of an airline. She became a symbol of composure in the face of injustice. That evening, her phone wouldn't stop ringing invitations to speak, requests for articles, even book offers. Naomi simply read through the messages, then quietly turned off her screen. She sat on the sofa in her small Brooklyn apartment beside the old sandwich box she still couldn't bring herself to throw away. Outside, the city hummed. Naomi looked at the box and whispered softly, "Mom once told me, you can't control how people treat you, but you can control how you respond. I've responded, Mum. In her heart, there was no sense of victory, only peace and gratitude for those who had endured in silence before her. 3 days later, the Skybridge headquarters was flooded with reporters. Cameras crowded at the gates, waiting for the official statement. Naomi stepped onto the podium with no notes in hand. She spoke plainly, but every word carried the weight of a vow. We have seen clearly it doesn't take a storm to sink a brand, only a single moment of disrespect. Skybridge made a mistake, and I, as its leader, accept full responsibility. A reporter raised a hand. Will you take legal action against the crew? Naomi shook her head. No, I don't need more victims. I need more lessons. She paused briefly, then continued. We have terminated those who violated policy, but punishment alone isn't enough. I want change at the root. Starting today, every Skybridge employee will undergo empathy training, not through lectures, but through experience. They will sit where passengers sit. They will learn to see people. The rapid clicking of keyboards filled the room as headlines began to take shape. Another reporter asked, "And you, Dr. Ellis? What have you learned from all this?" Naomi looked straight into the camera and smiled gently. I've learned that power can't protect anyone. Only dignity can. When the press conference ended, Naomi walked outside. The doors of headquarters opened, sunlight pouring across her face. Dozens of strangers, passengers, flight attendants from across the country stood across the street, clapping. A hand-painted sign read, "Thank you, Naomi. You spoke for us." She stopped, placed her hand over her heart, and simply nodded. Amid the noise of the city, Naomi Ellis understood. Sometimes change doesn't begin with a speech. It begins with a moment of humiliation that is seen and turned into light. In the sky above, a Skybridge jet rose, leaving a white trail across the blue. Naomi looked up, a quiet smile in her eyes. She knew that from now on, every Skybridge flight would carry a new mission, not just to take people where they want to go, but to bring the world closer to respect. 3 weeks after the press conference, the headquarters of Skybridge Airways felt like a different place. The lavish posters that once filled the lobby, images of champagne leather seats and luxury dining, had been replaced with a new message, handwritten by Naomi Ellis on a yellow sticky note. Respect is our first-class seat. The small piece of paper had been enlarged, printed, and displayed in every branch, hanging before every employee. It wasn't a marketing slogan. It was a reminder. Naomi walked through the lobby, her footsteps soft against the marble floor. Staff members passed by, nodding to her, not with the formal, practiced gestures of before, but with genuine respect. She smiled back gently, then entered the main conference room, where Anthony Rivera and the team were waiting. Standing by the digital board, Anthony began with a firm voice. Here's our report 3 weeks after the SB-218 incident. Positive sentiment toward Skybridge is up 22%, and new bookings have rebounded after an initial 12% drop. He paused, glancing at Naomi. But the most important part, 86% of our staff say they feel ashamed of what happened. And I think that's the real beginning of change. Naomi nodded. Shame can be a good emotion if it leads to action. Across the table, Monica Green, the head of human resources, opened her laptop and played a video from the new program, The Empathy Flight. In it, real flight attendants took on the roles of passengers, people with disabilities, the elderly people of color, single mothers. They were served by their own colleagues without revealing their identities. One attendant, her eyes brimming with tears, said after the test flight, "I never knew being ignored could hurt this much until it happened to me." The room fell silent. Naomi exhaled slowly. "That's why I did all this. When people can feel pain, only then can they understand the value of respect." The meeting ended. Naomi was about to step into the elevator when a young employee stopped her. "Miss Ellis, I just wanted to say thank you. I was once criticized by a passenger because of my skin color, and no one stood up for me. But after what you did, I know I'm not alone." Naomi placed a hand on his shoulder, her gaze kind, yet firm. No one should ever feel alone just because they are different. Never let the world convince you that silence is survival. The young man smiled, eyes glistening. "Thank you." As the elevator doors closed, Naomi caught her reflection in the mirrored wall, not that of a CEO, but of a woman learning to lead with compassion. 3 days later at Skybridge's Grand Auditorium, Naomi stood on stage before more than 600 employees. On the screen behind her were the words, "Flight 447 revisited the day we learned to see." The front row seat remained empty, with a small plaque that read, "Reserved for every passenger who has ever been hurt." Naomi began speaking, her tone steady, calm, unwavering. 3 weeks ago, we flew under blue skies, and some of us forgot that humanity doesn't come with seat classes. But today, we have a chance to correct our course. The soft sound of pens scribbling echoed across the hall. Naomi recounted that day, not dramatizing, not blaming. She spoke about the sting of being ignored, of being seen as out of place, and about the moment she stood up not as a CEO, but as a woman who had been humiliated in the sky. "Sometimes," she said, "we don't need million-dollar campaigns to make change. All it takes is one person brave enough to stand and say enough." The audience rose in applause. Some wept. Afterward, Naomi went up to the 72nd floor, the top office of the building. From there, she could see all the way to JFK Airport, where hundreds of Skybridge planes were preparing for takeoff. On one of them, the company's logo had been updated, with a new line beneath its silver wings. "Every seat deserves dignity." Naomi smiled. Anthony entered, holding the morning financial paper. "You should see this." The headline on the front page read, "Skybridge from crisis to the new standard of service." Anthony grinned. "You know the stock is climbing again. But what makes me happiest is that for the first time, we're being praised not for profit, but for principle." Naomi smiled softly. When respect becomes a business strategy, it's no longer a tactic, it's evolution. That evening, Naomi found a handwritten letter in her office mailbox. The envelope was marked, "From Darius Mitchell." She opened it, the handwriting slightly uneven, but full of emotion. "Dr. Ellis. That day, I thought I was just standing up for a stranger being mistreated. But it turns out I was witnessing a moment in history. Thank you for not responding with anger, but for letting the world see the truth through the light of dignity. I told my 2 daughters about you. I told them, when someone makes you feel small, don't strike back. Stand tall and let your integrity speak for you. With gratitude, Darius." Naomi reread the last line, her eyes stinging. She placed the letter in her drawer beside her mother's gold necklace. "I did it, Mum," she whispered. "I made them see." Night fell. The Skybridge Tower glowed in soft amber light. Naomi sat by the glass window, a cup of tea in hand, gazing out at the runway. A Boeing 787 lifted into the sky, its trail of light stretching across the dark horizon, beautiful and still, like her faith in what is right. In that moment, Naomi wasn't thinking about crises or public relations or stock prices. She was thinking about the one truth that had carried her through it all. Dignity cannot be taken unless we give it away. She smiled, closed her eyes, and listened to the fading roar of engines. From somewhere deep in memory, her mother's voice echoed, gentle yet strong, "Fly high, my girl. But never forget the ground you stand on." Naomi opened her eyes, watching as the plane disappeared into the clouds. She knew that from now on, every Skybridge flight would carry not just passengers, but a promise that no matter how high we fly, we must always treat one another with respect. And that was the new wing on which Skybridge would rise. When the world thought the story of Skybridge had landed in truth, it had only just taken off, not in the sky, but in the hearts of millions. Just 2 months after that fateful flight, major business schools like Harvard, Wharton, and Stanford all added the incident of Flight SB-218 to their curriculum. They called it the Naomi Ellis Effect, a case study in leadership born from lived experience, where one small action, one calm reaction could transform an entire system. That morning, the Harvard lecture hall buzzed softly. Hundreds of MBA students sat in silence as the screen showed the clip of Naomi being denied her meal. When it ended, the professor's voice echoed through the room. She could have lost her temper, but she chose to record. She could have reacted, but she chose to respond. And that is why she is not just a CEO. She is a guide. One student raised a hand. "So what makes her different?" the professor answered firmly. She did not retaliate. She transformed. The room went still. A rare quiet swept through, as if each person was seeing their reflection in the mirror named Naomi Ellis. In New York, Naomi kept her usual work schedule. But every day, her office received dozens of letters from flight attendants, hotel workers, factory employees, even students of color. One letter made her pause longer than the rest. It came from Carmen Lee, a flight attendant for another airline. "Dear Dr. Ellis, I watched the full video. I've seen colleagues treat passengers differently, but I was afraid of losing my job, afraid of being isolated. But when I saw you stand without shouting, I realized that strength is not in the volume of a voice, but in the truth behind it. Since that day, I've started to speak up, and I'm not afraid anymore. Thank you for showing me that dignity doesn't need a first-class ticket to be seen." Naomi folded the letter, her heart heavy with quiet emotion. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she looked out the window where a Skybridge Dreamliner was taking off. Sunlight streamed through the glass, touching her face, reflecting a rare sense of peace. 3 months passed, and the movement Passenger Dignity started by Darius Mitchell spread across America. It began as a series of videos showing fair treatment in service, but it grew into a national social movement. People no longer spoke only about airplanes, but about hotels, restaurants, and luxury stores. Anywhere service and humanity met. Hundreds of companies began signing up for the Dignity Audit, a secret evaluation program run by Skybridge in partnership with a non-profit organization. A year earlier, the phrase customer experience had meant marketing strategy. Now it meant moral commitment. One early autumn afternoon, Naomi was invited to speak at the Global Aviation Union in Geneva. The room was elegant, its glass walls overlooking the shimmering gold of Lake Léman. More than 200 airline executives sat in silence as Naomi walked to the podium. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, no symbols of power. When the microphone came alive, she didn't talk about crisis or revenue. She began with a story. 3 months ago, I received a letter from a passenger. He said that after watching the video of Flight SB218, his daughter asked, "Daddy, why didn't they let that lady eat with everyone else?" And he said he didn't know how to answer. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. That was the moment I realized we're not just running airlines. We're teaching the next generation how to see others. And I asked myself, are we teaching them the right thing? A heartbeat of silence passed. Then the hall erupted into long, sustained applause. After the speech, several CEOs came forward to shake her hand. One said, "You made us re-examine every employee we have." Another smiled. "You reminded me that sometimes the greatest lessons come from first class." Naomi smiled humbly. "If every flight we operate can teach someone about kindness, then aviation has fulfilled its purpose." That night, Naomi sat alone in her hotel room by the lake. The wind was gentle, the water rippled under the moonlight. She opened her laptop and replayed the clip from that day. Karen Sloan, the lead flight attendant, who had once said, "Know your place," was no longer in the industry. But Naomi still remembered her face, not with anger, but with empathy. She whispered, "If I could, I would tell her thank you." Because she made me see the shadow I had once overlooked. Naomi stopped the video and opened a new document titled Leadership Notes Flight SB218. She typed, "No leader is truly strong until they have been humbled. No organization can grow until it dares to face its own mistakes." She saved the file and smiled softly. The next morning, Naomi left Geneva boarding Skybridge Flight 707 back to New York. A young flight attendant approached, bowing slightly. "Miss Ellis, thank you for flying with us. Would you like champagne or water?" Naomi smiled kindly. "Thank you. Water, please. And serve the gentleman next to me first." "He looks tired." The attendant nodded and moved quickly. Naomi watched her go, a quiet pride warming her chest. As the plane began to taxi, Naomi opened her notebook and wrote one final line. "Sometimes you don't have to shout to change the world. You just have to act right, even when others don't." She closed the notebook and leaned back. Outside the window, the American sky stretched vast and blue, no longer divided between first class and economy, only filled with people flying together in the same direction, respect. And in that endless sky, Naomi Ellis closed her eyes and smiled. She had come full circle from the sandwich of humiliation to the feast of humanity. A woman once told to know her place had now taught the world one undeniable truth. The place of every human being is wherever they are treated with respect. 3 months after her trip to Geneva, Naomi Ellis returned to Skybridge headquarters, carrying a quiet sense of peace. Everything felt different now. There were no more curious stares or forced polite greetings. The air in the building was lighter, more genuine, as if, after the storm, the whole company had finally learned how to breathe again. That morning, Naomi opened her email and saw a message from the training department. The subject line read, "Dignity Flight Program, First Phase Results." She clicked it open. The numbers appeared on the screen. 97% of passengers rated their experience as very satisfied, and 98% of employees said they felt more proud of their work. But the line that made Naomi pause was at the bottom. A new flight attendant wrote, "I used to think respect was just professional rule. Now I understand it's the way to stay human, even when you have to smile 1,000 times a day." Naomi read it slowly, a gentle smile spreading across her face. Sometimes, Success didn't need charts or reports. It only needed a sentence like that. That afternoon, she left the office early and drove to the old neighborhood where her mother had lived. The small house in Brooklyn was unchanged. The green painted wall, the wooden porch with the creaky rocking chair. Naomi sat down, gazing at the front yard, where her mother used to make tea and say, "Never let others teach you how to see yourself. You must be the one to choose the mirror." She closed her eyes and listened to the wind, the faint sound of the subway echoing in the distance. She smiled. Years ago, she had dreamed of flying high. Now, standing at the height people called success, she only wanted to make that sky a little warmer. As night fell, Naomi opened her laptop and began writing a letter, addressed to the leaders who will come after a message she planned to post on Skybridge's internal site for the company's anniversary. She typed slowly, "To those who will continue this journey. If one day you stand in the face of crisis, remember what matters is not the fastest reaction, but the right one. When you are humiliated, do not retaliate. Prove your worth through integrity. When you are doubted, do not bow down. Let truth speak for itself. And when you hold power, remember this power is not meant to punish, but to protect. I was once told to know my place. Now I understand that a person's true place isn't found in a ticket class or a title, it's found in how they make others feel." Naomi paused, her eyes softening. She added one final line. "If Skybridge ever forgets this value again, remember, Flight SB218, the flight where a sandwich taught the world about dignity." She signed it Naomi Ellis, the woman who once sat in seat 2A. When the clock struck 11 that night, Naomi shut her laptop and poured herself a cup of tea. Outside the window, the lights of New York glowed like a river that never stopped moving. She knew that tomorrow would bring meetings, plans, and numbers once more. But in that moment, all that remained was stillness. Naomi lifted her cup and spoke softly to herself, or perhaps to her mother. "I've found my place. Mom. Not in a first-class seat, but in the hearts of people who know how to respect one another." Outside, a Skybridge plane crossed the night sky, its lights blinking red, blue, like the heartbeat of something coming back to life. Naomi watched it and smiled. That journey was no longer hers alone. It now belonged to everyone brave enough to hold on to their dignity and rise. 6 months after Flights B218, the skies over America carried a new shade of meaning. Every time a Skybridge plane took off, people remembered the story of the woman in seat 2A, a story that was no longer a scandal, but a symbol of awakening. Naomi Ellis no longer appeared frequently in the media. She avoided interviews, book deals, and speaking invitations. She simply worked quietly, as if what the world called a historic turning point was just another day in her long journey. One early winter morning, Naomi visited the company's new training center, built after the incident and named the Dignity Hub. The building stood near JFK Airport, its design simple walls made of glass, so natural light could pour in. Inside, instead of formal conference rooms, there were simulated airplane cabins for real-life training. On the wall was a single phrase, "No one is forgotten in the sky." She walked down the corridor, listening to voices from the first training class. An instructor asked, "If a passenger doesn't dress elegantly, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?" A young woman answered firmly, "I'd think they still deserve to be treated like a human being." Naomi stopped and smiled. That answer, so simple, was the result of months of change. During the year-end meeting, Anthony Rivera presented the annual report. This year, Skybridge became the first American airline to receive the Human Dignity Standard certification from the International Aviation Union. More than 120 airlines have registered to study our program. The room burst into applause. But Naomi wasn't looking at the graphs. She was looking at faces people who had once been afraid, once silent, now glowing with belief. Her voice was calm but steady. Don't see this as a victory. See it as a reminder that we can choose to do right, even when the world chooses what's easy. Today we stand tall, but tomorrow, if one person is treated unjustly, we fall again. No one replied, only nodded, because they all understood she wasn't speaking the language of a boss, but the language of conscience. Later that afternoon, Naomi walked out to the airport. A light rain was falling, droplets sliding across the windshield. She stood there, watching a newly painted Dreamliner with its silver wings and the new slogan, "Beneath every flight begins with respect." Over the speakers, the flight attendant's voice echoed, "Skybridge Flight 447 to London is now departing. Please hold on to your faith in this journey." Naomi smiled. Faith, that was what she had fought to reclaim. That evening at home, she poured herself a glass of red wine and opened an old email from Darius Mitchell. He had added a new line. "Dr. Ellis, I've become a university lecturer. Every year I tell your story to my students. I call it the lesson, When Power Bows Before Dignity." Naomi placed her hand over her heart and whispered, "Not power bowing. It's people learning to look each other in the eye." Outside the window, the night sky shimmered with silver clouds. A Skybridge plane crossed the heavens, its blinking red and blue lights reflecting in her glass. Naomi raised her wine, not in celebration, not in pride, but as a quiet prayer. May everyone who boards the flight of their life carry with them a little respect, a little courage, and a little light. She smiled and closed her eyes. In the silence, she heard the fading sound of engines, not just the hum of machines, but the sound of a world learning to fly with compassion. And high above that storm-cleared sky, the name Naomi Ellis glowed quietly, not as a legend, but as a compass guiding every heart toward the truest form of class respect. From the perspective of an expert in ethical leadership, Naomi Ellis's journey is not just the story of a first-class seat, but a testament to the power of dignity in the face of prejudice. She did not use her authority to retaliate, but used calmness to hold up a mirror to an entire system, reminding us that fairness does not begin with rules, but with how people choose to see and respect one another. In a world where success is often measured by status, Naomi taught that true worth lies in how we treat those who hold less power than we do. If you believe that respect is the highest form of class, like this video to spread that message. Subscribe to the channel to continue following stories where humanity is tested by power, and comment below with the phrase that reflects your belief in that value: hold your dignity.